All right, with Sal Capaccio, yes, we are in a fraternity of sideline reporters. He does a killer job with WGR Sports Radio 550. He also has his extra point show. He's all over the place, the hardest working man in sports media in Buffalo, bar none, bar none. And kind enough to give us a couple of minutes here on the show. Thanks for being here, man. Great to see you. And I got to ask you, are you going to do the Movember thing and get rid of this or no?
Ooh, man, I've never really thought about that. As people like us who now have to do multimedia, when we got into the radio, it was just radio, right? Now you
Yeah.
got on TV and you got to do these web things. And I'm always afraid of that. It's actually, I decide when to shave my head based on when I'm doing TV work, to be honest with you. Like, well, I can't tonight. It might grow a little bit of stubble there. Not really sure about that. By the way, great to see you. Two guys, you were on the sidelines once for the Bills. I know that. And when I talked to Paul Peck, he's a guy that's done it as well. So it's cool. So good to be on with you tonight.
Yeah, awesome, man. All right, a lot of things to talk about. And this one, I don't know if it's been talked about that much, and it's probably really hard. It's almost goes back to the whole thing with, the Jaguars game. And, well, can you really statistically, data driven wise, like determine whether or not, you should go to Jacksonville at one time or another, right? So this is a whole different thing, but similar. The Bills schedule, because they're good and other good teams are going through the same thing, is absolutely crazy. It's so inconsistent. Like they have how many 1 o'clock games this year? Hardly any. So they're 4 o'clock, they're a Monday night, they're a Sunday night, they're a Thursday night. How much do you think that, and I know it's not probably technically measurable, but how much do you think that comes into play when it comes to any inconsistent on field play for them?
I don't want to be inconsistent and say that I think it matters, because I'll go back to Sean McDermott when he started here in 2017 and they make the playoffs. They start to get a few of these games, 18, 19. They have Thanksgiving Day games. And I've always really respected and appreciated the fact that they've been good in those spots. Every time they've had these changes, prime time, I think that he runs such a consistent program that it really doesn't impact them. Where I do think it matters, though, is, as players and coaches are creatures of routine, right? And like once you get thrown out of your routine, if things are a little off, I think it's a little harder to get back into that routine, and you press a little bit to make sure that you're doing all the things right. The other part is, look, Rich, it's one thing to have 5 primetime games in a year. It's quite another to have 3 in a row, which they have, right? Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night. And then it's the home 425 games, which are a little weird. So I do think that can matter, throwing you off your routine if you're not quite right. But I think in general, Sean McDermott does a very good job of keeping his team really consistent no matter when they have to. We can debate till the cows come home about London, and the Bills will. They'll look at that. They'll look at what they need to do next time they go overseas. And the teams have done it both ways, and they've had mixed results. So, we'll see. But right now, I'm glad they had a 10-day mini bye here, little break to kind of reset themselves.
No kidding. And I want to ask you a little bit about that in terms of Cincinnati in a second. Dorian Williams, where'd he go? What's going on with him?
Well, I think he's going to be a really good football player.
Me too.
I think the Bills think he's going to be a really good football player. I think the game hasn't slowed down enough for him yet. I think that he's been a little too, he's very instinctive, but I think that's been kind of his detriment as well. Like he's so instinctive, he's so fast, he flies the ball and, oh, wait a minute, they're going the other way. Or wait a minute, I missed a tackle, or, an over pursuit, a missed tackle here or there, maybe trying too hard to see things so quickly you get there. You got to let the game slow down for you a little bit. You watch Matt Milano playing. I'm not going to compare Williams to Milano. Milano's an all pro, obviously, but Matt Milano, he sees things quickly, but he knows exactly the right angle to take, or he knows the gap and the fit right there. I don't think Dorian Williams has quite learned that yet. So, I think that right now they're in a position. Look, if the Bills were 2-6, he'd be playing, I think, but they're not. They're fighting for a division and playoffs and a Super Bowl, and they want to make sure they have guys who are doing the right thing and not costing them and hurting them. And right now, I think Tyrell Dodson is the safer play to put there.
Let me ask you too about Elam. I know it was brought up this week by the coach. I think he was asked about it, and they mentioned he's had an ankle issue, and yet, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen him on an injury report. So I think the fan base is like, well, wait a minute, where'd this come from?
He was on the injury report last week.
Was he? Okay.
But he was a full participant in practice. But he was and I think he might have been leading up even the week before. And I will also say that was it Bean or was it McDermott? One of them actually said a couple of weeks ago that he had re-aggravated something from training camp. This is going back a little while. while. So it's there. Look, but I think we can all see also what's going on here. Look, he's not performing to the level of they trust him again, that word, to put him on the field. So if there is something going on, there's no harm in letting him kind of reset a little bit. Yes, he's dealing with the injury. That'll let him get healthy. Could this be a situation? I don't know his exact health. Could this be a situation where, look, if he was playing really well, we could fight through this. We could have him on the field, but why not? If he's not going to play, shelve him for a few weeks, let him see the game from the sidelines, let him learn a little bit. Let's make sure that we got another guy in here. And let's take care of everything all at once. So that's probably what's going on here. I thought it was interesting on, Wednesday when we were with Brandon Bean, that he said shutting him down doesn't mean the whole year. They put him on IR, they let him reset, they let him get healthy, he comes back. I do think they want this to work out, Rich. I mean, why not? He's a first round pick. You don't want to let that walk away for nothing. They weren't going to do a Boogie Basham deal for him, right? Like trade him away basically and swap late round picks. He has more value to the Buffalo Bills right now than he does around the league. And the Bills want to see that value. And maybe he can kind of, get to a point where they think he is a lot more useful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's got size and athleticism. So
Yeah.
why not, take that time and make him into what you think he was going to be and hasn't gotten there yet. So good segue. Rasul Douglas, what do we know about him? How soon does he get into the lineup? Is it as early as this weekend?
I don't know if they'd be able to do that. Now, if he did, I wouldn't, let me put it this way. It wouldn't surprise me if he dressed. I don't know if he'd be able to play defensive snaps. Maybe he'd be in case of emergency, he'd be there, because if you're going to put Kaiir Elam on IR, if he's not going to play, which seems to be the indication, you almost have to play him. Who's your boundary corner? Are you going to bring up Josh Norman again? I guess you could do that. That's always a possibility. You have Jamarcus Ingram, of course, you could do that. But maybe he's a guy who had break glass in case of emergency. Let's just have him there. Maybe he can play a couple special teams, run down, do something on a kickoff like Josh Norman did. I don't know about, playing right away. We'll see about that. What are they getting? They're getting a guy who has tied for the third most interceptions in the league over the last 3 years with 10 interceptions over the last 3 years, including this year, Rich. All Bills corners combined, only 12 interceptions over the last 3 years. This guy is a ball hawk from a zone corner, right? When you play zone, it's not as easy to get necessarily all those interceptions if you're kind of keeping everything in front of you, but he does a great job of being instinctual when that happens. He's also a very good tackler, fits right into Sean McDermott's scheme. And then he's a really, really good leader in the locker room. But, I asked Sean McDermott about that, hey, you sign Josh Norman, you bring in Rasul Douglas. Is that an indication like you want a little more experience and leadership in a cornerback room that's suddenly very youthful? And he said, look, yes, he's great at that stuff, but you can't really lead in a new place until you get to know people. And I thought that was interesting, meaning we didn't bring him to be a leader, but that's a great bonus once he gets to that point.
For sure. Let's talk about Fournette too. He gets added at the trade deadline as well. And his nickname is Playoff Lenny. So did the Bills get Fournette for the postseason, or did they get him for, mid to late season as someone to spell or supplement Latavius Murray?
I think both, but look, I don't think this is necessarily an indictment on Latavius Murray. I think this just is a replacement for Damian Harris.
Yeah.
So you probably go back to what you had early in the season when James Cook, I looked it up. James Cook was on the field for like 40 something snaps a game. And then Murray and Harris were combined for about 30. Okay. That's probably about what this looks like. And then when it comes to touches, I don't think they're going to be necessarily making, Leonard Fournette the number one back or anything like that. It's still James Cook's backfield as the lead guy, but a lead guy in Buffalo doesn't get, the bell cow type of carries we've seen with other teams and other situations. So I do think it's for as the season goes on, but it's also for, hey, when the playoffs come, you got tougher weather, you can't throw the ball as much. Now you have a guy that can, he's obviously powerful. What they really got him for too, I think though, Rich, was they really needed, I think what they feel they needed, a third down back who can pass protect. He's very good at pass protecting and catch passes out of the backfield. Look at his numbers. The guy had 73 catches last year in the NFL. I mean, he had 100 targets not too long ago when he caught 76 passes back just a few years ago. And I wonder what that means for Ty Johnson. They still have Ty Johnson on the roster. And just so everybody knows how it works, they can elevate Leonard Fournette 3 different times from the practice squad without even taking a roster spot. And then when they're ready for it, then they can do it. So they can play some roster gymnastics here for a little while.
Yeah. And what's your theory as to why Leonard Fournette was not on a team until now this year? I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. I just figured he's a guy that can kind of pick and choose if he wanted to, right? And here's a situation to be on a playoff team, arguably, arguably one of the best teams in the AFC, arguably chasing a Super Bowl. Why not, right?
Yeah. I mean, pick and choose. Obviously, I know what you mean. It's not like he has 32 teams that want him necessarily.
Sure,
Right.
yeah.
I think it's more about Leonard Fournette, as much about him choosing the Bills as the Bills choosing him, which is what you're saying, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I'm sure teams have called, see how you're doing, check in on you. Well, what's my role? I don't have to sign now. I don't have to go to training camp. You know what I mean? I can wait. What's my best situation? I want to win another ring, and then there's the part of, Leonard Fournette having some mileage on him. And I think that teams probably look at that. Look, he's 28, which is quite a bit younger even than Latavius Murray, but he's had like the same amount of carries with 5 less years in the league. So this guy, you go back, I looked at his college stats. You remember him in college, Rich? He was amazing.
Of course, LSU, yeah.
300 carries one year in college. He had 1,900 yards, 22 touchdowns that year. Played 3 years, but this guy carried the ball a lot in college. And then in the NFL, he's carried the ball a lot. He has a lot of tread on those tires. So I'm sure that was part of it with teams going, hey, he might be 28, but really you add it up. He's like a 32, 33-year-old running back. How much does he have left? But now he didn't go through the training camp or preseason. He's probably a little bit refreshed and he passed the Bills physical. So I'm interested to see what he can do.
And I wonder too if Trey White had anything to do with him coming here, because if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure they were LSU teammates at one point before they both got into the league. Let's fast forward to the Bengals. You were there last January. Obviously, a lot's going to be made about the last time the Bills were in Cincinnati and obviously what happened. Take me through sort of what it was like for you being on the sideline during that game, going through what you went through personally and obviously as a professional that night, man.
So as you know, as much as anyone, in our role down there on the sidelines, we are the information gatherer and the information teller, right? I mean, our job is to dispense the information to the listeners. That's our first and foremost job. We observe, we tell the information. In that moment, yes, I'm recognizing what's going on, but honestly, I'm trying to get that information to tell everybody what's going on. I'm not thinking about it maybe in the humanity sense in that very moment, right? That came a little bit later. Now it's, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what's going on. And obviously you saw the wall around him with the human wall. We didn't see directly in, but I could tell you the time that I knew it was happening was Thad Brown of Channel 8 in Rochester. He had his camera on the sidelines. He was, filming the game. And he said to me, I said, Thad, what are you seeing? He said, it looks to me like they're doing CPR on him. That's the first time I even noticed and then looked around and then you could see what was happening. And I thought they were trying to cut off the face mask, which they might've been actually, but they were working on up top. So like I said, in that moment, we're really trying to be the eyes and ears for all of our viewers, all of our listeners, I should say, locally and nationally. I mean, it's a Monday night game. People are tuning in and they're satellite radio and things like that. So that's the initial part of it. And then you see the emotion on players' faces. And then you kind of really start to realize the gravity of what's happening there. And I tell this story, and I told this story a lot after it happened, which was I heard a voice behind me. It was a woman. She was trying to get on the field. I turn around. It's Damar's mom. And all the players and all the coaches and all the trainers are out on the field. So I turn around. I see Dane Jackson. I get Dane Jackson's attention. I get the team chaplain's attention, kind of tell them. They go and get security for the Bills. Bills security goes, gets Bengals security. And it's the stadium's designed a lot like Buffalo, but you can't get on the field like you can in Buffalo right at the 50-yard line.
Yeah.
The steps are there. So they told her to go all, hey, this is where you go meet the ambulance. So that was something that was that was heavy. That was emotional. Watching that, seeing her, talking to her. She goes over, they take the ambulance off. She winds up meeting the ambulance in the tunnel. And what I'll never forget about that night is, Rich, I mean, I'm on the field and they're debating what to do here. The players and the coaches, and Cincinnati coaches are talking to Buffalo coaches. And I look, and from the vantage point I was in, it would be kind of like in Buffalo, but a little different because the tunnel is located on the corner, not in the end zone like it is in Buffalo. The ambulance is in the tunnel with its lights on with Damar Hamlin, and people are out there warming up. And I'm like, how are you playing a game? That guy is in that ambulance right now after what just happened. There's no way they're going to play this game, right? And obviously, they collectively said, we can't play this game. And Sean McDermott, talking to Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Bengals, and they decided to go off the field. And that's when eventually the ambulance left. Then they decided to talk, and then we see them in the tunnel. And then, just so everybody knows how kind of what happened, we weren't allowed to have cameras in the tunnel, and I couldn't broadcast because you just can't get reception, right? You're in this tunnel. So I had to go in and find out what's going on, then come out and join. That was the first night that we didn't have Murph. Murph at his medical event.
Yep.
Same weekend. That was the first night that Chris Brown did the game. And Chris is thrown in the situation where all of this is going on. It's his first time doing the game. So I had to walk out of the tunnel, go on with Chris and Eric. And then, we threw it back to network control, all that kind of stuff. But for me, that was more of it. And then afterwards, sitting on the bus, sitting on the plane, coming home the next day, that's when it hit me more from a real humanistic side of what kind of just happened on that field that night.
For sure. I know we're in a hurry, and I got a couple more for you if it's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, is there any kind of based on, and we know the playoff game happened, and I know and it's a good argument that, the team was just spent at that point, right?
Yeah.
Physically and mentally. But if they watch that game back, and I don't know if they will or have, but I'm suspecting there might be a little bit of an unfinished business kind of angle going into this game where, we had this opportunity. We really weren't capable of being who we wanted to be that day, but now we can. Does that make sense?
I think it makes total sense. And actually, when you say it, I think I've thought about this week too. I kind of liken it to when the Bills beat the Colts in the playoffs, and then the Colts came to Buffalo the next year and just completely demolished them. Remember that game? Right. And I think, the Colts kind of made it clear, like, this team took away an opportunity that was ours last year. And, it's our chance to kind of show that, we're better now, and we're not going to let that happen again. I'm not saying the Bills are going to go to Cincinnati and do what the Colts did to the Bills that day in Orchard Park, but it does remind me of that, where I agree with you. And I think, for Bills fans' sake, you'd like for that to happen, where they have that chip on their shoulder and say, okay, what happened that night in Cincinnati with DeMar? The Bengals were driving, they were winning, and we never got a chance to finish the game. And then they come to Buffalo and do that to us when we were not in our best physical or mental state. I would not doubt that players and coaches are approaching this game of, hey, you know what? It'd be nice to show this team who we really are.
Yeah, and there's a lot of significant differences too. I mean, if you go back to that playoff game, obviously, both lines of scrimmage were dominated, but those lines of scrimmages are now clearly different. Injury on the defensive line side of it in terms of the middle of it, and offensively in the middle of it is different because there's no Saffold, and the right guard obviously is different with Torrance and now McGovern playing there. So yes, there's differences, but still the core of those groups are still in play, and Von Miller is back, which is different from a year ago as well.
Micah Hyde.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I know a lot of this is going to sound cliche, but is there also sort of a sense of urgency in this game in terms of conference standings? I mean, the Bengals are winless. We know the Bills of where they are in the conference. This would be really costly for both of these teams, whichever one loses, right?
The monster game. It really is. You look at the schedule this week. The Ravens have the Seahawks, the Chiefs and Dolphins play, right? And it really, if you kind of even go out and forecast out, I was looking at some of the schedules coming up over the next few weeks. Like, there's some really big AFC games, and some of these teams have some really big games that they're going to have to start beating each other to make sure they can jockey for position. You're right. The Bills, they're already 2 losses in the division, 2 losses in the conference, 3 losses in the conference, 2 in the division. They can't afford to drop another one here. I mean, they're trying to catch the Miami Dolphins. I mean, you think about the swing here. If the Dolphins beat the Chiefs, we'll know, by the way, because they play Sunday morning. Bills play Sunday night. If the Dolphins beat the Chiefs and the Bills lose, Dolphins are 2 games up on the Bills, right? If the other reverse happens, if the Bills win and the Dolphins lose, Bills are suddenly in first place in the AFC East. And, they're fighting for the 1 seed, and they have Kansas City still on their schedule, who they can beat. So this is a wild swing. But for the Cincinnati Bengals, they went through Joe Burrow's thing with his calf, and, they lost 3 games. Now they've won. They look really good. But, man, they lost some ground early on, and they need to make that up as well.
Okay, so last thing, what's going to happen?
I think it's going to be a really close game. I do. And I don't know. I'm not going to make a prediction here. We'll save that for later on in the week on my other media platforms. But I do think it's going to be a close game. I know that the Cincinnati Bengals are playing really good football right now, but I think the Bills having 10 days to prepare, 10 days to think about how they want to attack this team will really help. They had some new wrinkles last week with Jordan Poyer and the defense. And, I think Sean McDermott will come up with something here. And I really like what the Bills did offensively last week to be able to spread the ball around. But Rich, I think this game can just go either way based on a field goal here, a field goal there, one turnover either way. I think that could be the difference.
All right. Well, listen, man, I know you're insanely busy. You got all kinds of things to tend to, and I appreciate you taking a couple of minutes out with us as always. And looking forward to your call from the sideline on Sunday night out in Cincinnati, man.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks so much.
You got it.